Hi, hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Natalie, I'm a media design student and aspiring to be illustrator. And I currently have an Instagram account with about 17k followers where I upload my illustrations and sketches regularly. And since photo posts are finally making a comeback on Instagram, I wanted to make a little tutorial on how I took my photos from this to this, and how maybe you also can make your posts a little bit more interesting and consistent in style so your followers and others can always find you and recognize your posts in a way too overcrowded timeline or way too overcrowded explore page. For this I will show you 3 steps of how I set up, how I take and how I edit my photos, and hopefully you can take out some helpful tips for your own posts. So the first step is the setup, and I'm gonna start with I think one of the most important points of this video, and that's the light. I think the best way to take pictures is by looking for a spot in your room or your house that has the most natural light. You can go outside for that too. I've seen people take wonderful pictures in their garden too, because I think light is one of the things that's very hard to fix later on while editing. So I use my desk by my window for that, but sadly, as you can see, I'm not getting all the natural light there. There's still a wall that casts a very harsh shadow on my table, so I usually use a second light from the other side to kind of cancel that shadow out. And a tip from me would be to use a cold light and not a warm light. If your lamp kind of has like a yellowish light, I think it can make the photos a little bit more muddy. So if you can find like any lamp that has a colder light, I would say use that over the other one. So another thing that I like to use while taking the photos is usually a tripod or a boom arm, just so my photos are maybe a little bit less shaky, because I personally have very shaky hands. So I try to avoid that by putting my camera up on a boom arm, and it just makes it a little bit easier. So the thing I use a lot in my pictures is props, because I think they can make a simple picture of your drawing a little bit more interesting, especially if you use things that enhance the drawing, like match the colors or just go with the theme of the drawing. I use a lot of backdrops like black folders or other like notebooks to make the background more interesting than just having my white desk behind it. Also, I used to use my keyboard a lot, and for example, I own a lot of crystals or jewelry, so I like to use that if it matches. I use flowers a lot since I have a lot of flowers in my room, and in this particular video I had flowers left from my birthday that I just used as props for some of my drawings that are more on the calm side, or just portraits, and like other things that maybe also represent you. Like for example, I put my glasses there. You can just look around your room and like figure out some stuff, because sometimes even things that you would not consider a good prop can actually work really well with the drawing. And also, I can't believe I almost forgot to mention this, obviously you can totally use the art supplies you used to make that drawing as a prop too. I think that's the most interesting prop you can use for your drawings, because it just gives your followers an idea what you used, and it just, I mean, it already fits to the painting itself because it has that certain prop in it. So even if you only use your art supplies, I think it can already add a lot to the picture. So moving on to step 2, which is actually taking the photos. I usually use my camera and a boom arm for the setup, but this time I'm filming with it, so you're just gonna see me use my phone and no tripod or boom arm in general. For those curious, I have a Canon EOS M10 as a camera, which is very old, so actually my phone has a better quality in photos than my film camera. So you can just use your phone. Phones these days have so great quality when it comes to photos. So usually I take those photos in batches, so I don't have to set up all of this just for one drawing. So I have posts for quite a while and also can draw in the meantime and not think about taking a photo every day of every page that I draw or other things. So that's maybe also a tip. It obviously is not gonna be like in the same time you draw that, like you're not gonna have the posts in the same time, but it personally helped me, took my mind off of always having to think about having a new post or having to do all this for a good setup. Or for example, here in Germany, the sun is not always that good, so maybe the light is not as well on one day as on the other, so I usually just choose the days that are a little bit better for photo taking. And in general, I'm just taking the photos. So maybe a few tips that I have is you can follow the rule of thirds. So you can see on your camera this little grid. Some phones have this just already on. Sometimes you have to go into the settings to see the grid, but I usually just have it on, so it helps me kind of figure out the proportions of the photo. I guess this is how you can say it. So with the rule of thirds, you usually have the focus point in one of the corners, in the inner corners. It just helps you kind of get a better composition for the whole drawing, in my opinion. So you can use it. A little tip that I could probably give you is also taking several photos of one drawing. So you can see me in some pages that I take some close-ups of the spread, and that way I can create a carousel post, because I noticed that those are still getting more views. I feel like Instagram is putting those out much more than just single posts. That might change over time as the algorithm changes all the time, but just a little tip: if you have a spread, for example, just take some close-up shots, or if you have a drawing that's a little bit more detailed, take a few extra shots, then you can have a carousel post, and it's not gonna hurt you. Definitely. Maybe it even helps you. So in general, you can just see me put the props together depending on what theme the certain drawing has, or what might fit well, for example, with the colors or anything. And like I said earlier, I usually always add the art supplies that I used, just if someone is curious what I used. And yes, I think even just using the art supplies, if you really can't find anything else, already that can enhance your photo a little bit more and make it a little bit more interesting, instead of just taking a quick photo of the drawing and just calling it a day. I think it makes it a little more interesting. And last but not least, step 3, editing. So I personally use Lightroom for this, just because I already pay for the subscription anyway, but there's a lot of other editing apps that are just as fine. I edit my Instagram posts, like my personal Instagram posts, not the drawing ones, with other apps like Visco. There are several others that are probably even better than that and are for free, so you don't really have to pay such a big subscription for that. But I use Lightroom, and usually I already have my settings set from my other photo posts, so I usually just copy that and paste that. But for this video, obviously, I tried to do it from scratch again. So one of the things I mainly focus on while editing is balancing the whites. So for example, if there's still a little bit yellow light left, I just try to adjust the tone slider a little bit more into the blues, so it kind of cancels the yellow-ish tone out and makes it hopefully a little bit more white. And I'm trying to make for example, if I have pencil sketches, I try to make it pop a little bit by adding a little bit more contrast and a little bit more of the blacks. And if I can still see that there's shadows casted, especially on the lower half of the photo, I usually still have a little bit of a gradient shadow. So I just try to cancel that out with the gradient tool. I don't know which other apps have that too. I've only seen that in Lightroom, sadly, but if you know any other app that has that, please tell me. I use the gradient tool to just fix the shadows and make them a little bit lighter. And other than that, that's basically it. The last thing I do is usually fix the little specks that I might have on my drawing, or I also like to erase the date that I usually put on, because I like to put the date down where I drew that picture, just so I can have direct comparison if I ever want to compare two drawings together. But I don't really like having that in the picture itself, so I usually just erase that. And I don't know, I think it's not important, but I think it makes the picture look a little bit better. But yeah, that's basically all I do for editing, and then the photos are finished. So that's it. So that's basically all I do to spice up my photo posts a little bit, and also to keep my posts maybe a little bit more recognizable, even if I change my style for a post or like to experiment a lot, which I do a lot. So I hope you can take some helpful tips out of this and use them on your own. And if you do, please feel free to show me, because I'm really curious what you might come up with, and I would like to see your results and if any of this was helpful in any way. And if you've actually found any of this helpful, I'm thinking about making another video on how to grow your Instagram, because last year I started with 500 followers and I grew until now to 17,000 followers, which is still so unrealistic for me to say. It feels not real. But somehow I managed to do that, and I wanted to share some tips and tricks on how I did that, and also what happens if you take a little break from Instagram, because all we usually hear is that we have to keep consistent and we cannot take breaks. And I tried to figure out what happens then, so I took a few months off, and it's not that bad actually. So yeah, if you're interested in that, stay tuned, and I hope I can see you there. And yes, have a great and lovely day, and I wish you all the best. Don't overwork yourself, but stay creative and have fun exploring, taking photos of your art and making new art maybe. So yeah, goodbye. See you in the next one. Bye bye.